Tony Frank. Back to our Chancellor, our Chair of the NAAAN Steering Committee, and much of the reason why we are in the buildings that we are in today. So Tony, please.
It must have been the first year that I was president before I developed gray hair. So I hope you all had good visits this morning and at the various sessions yesterday went well and everything. Kerri asked me to spend a few minutes talking about not only what Spur is, but sort of the history of how it came about. A lot of that history, as most of you would probably guess, involves some serendipity, just some luck of various things happening at the right moments in time. We had a state legislature who had funded a large medical school project here in Denver for the University of Colorado. And there were leaders within that legislature who wanted to do something that was more rurally oriented, more agriculturally oriented. There were legislators who wanted to support Colorado State University to sort of balance the support that had just been given to the University of Colorado. There was a director of the Office of State Planning and Budget who was willing to support the bill because he inserted into it money to redo a few offices within the Capitol that he had a hard time getting money for. All those various pieces fell together and the state legislature appropriated $250 million, $200 million of which were spent on these three buildings that you'll see here at Spur, and $50 million on buildings that are related, connected to those through programming up on the Fort Collins campus. And you'll hear from President Parsons talking about that in just a moment. All of that was made possible by the fact that the stock show's facilities, and if you have a chance to step outside and look in that direction, you'll see some rather old looking facilities. Those were the facilities that the Western Stock Show Association uses to put on this 16-day event, the National Western Stock Show, every year in Denver. It's got a very large tourism and economic development impact on the city of Denver, and yet those facilities were in pretty bad shape. And the stock show had been talking about moving outside of Denver to find less expensive land and redo that. We had a new mayor at the time, this would have been back around 2010, 2011, who got wind of that, decided that losing that economic development engine didn't make sense. He put a panel together that recommended redeveloping this site, and so they procured the land and whatnot. They wanted a 24/7, 365-day-a-year educational tenant, if you will, to sort of anchor the facility. They invited us because we had been partners with the stock show for a long time to do that. And as I described, we were lucky enough to have these funds available from the legislature. And then the mayor went out to the city and county of Denver, to the voters, and proposed reusing a lodger's tax, a tax on hotels, as many of you will see on your bills when you check out to go home tomorrow. Part of that tax is repurposed into these facilities out here. That provided the funding, about $750 million over time, to go with our $250 million to essentially create $1 billion pot for the first couple of phases of this complex, which are our three buildings, and then the building that you'll see this evening where our event is, the Stockyard Event Center, the very large livestock arena that is going up that you'll see in between here, and then the space directly behind our Vita building where we hope soon the Equestrian Center will be going up. That's sort of the history of how this came to be. Once the voters passed that, we really got busy on things. I'll come back to that piece when I wrap up here. But perhaps I think the hardest question for any of us at CSU is to develop the short answer to the question, what is Spur, right? Because we do so many things here, and there are so many connections that we hope this place or these places establish. Connections between urban and rural, connections between K-12 and higher ed, connections between production agriculture and technologies that support it. We bring in extension services, all the connections between livestock and land and things that like the farm I grew up on in the early 1960s that now we would refer to as regenerative agriculture. All of these things are things that Spur does. So how do you describe it in one short little bit? Well, I would tell the story of Spur this way. And it actually, I think, relates very well to the theme of this meeting, which is providing the next generation of ag leadership. If you were going to provide the next generation of leadership for sustainably feeding the world, I would argue there's one ingredient you absolutely can't do without, and that's potential leaders. And yet, as we look around and look to the next cohort of where the potential leaders are in Colorado and indeed across America, we see farms consolidating, getting larger. We see rural populations tending to decline. We see fewer kids coming off of farm backgrounds. And yet, we see enrollment in our universities going up in places from urban areas and in kids from rural areas that maybe didn't have the opportunity to grow up on a working farm or ranch. We see a dramatic increase in small acreage agriculture and people being raised in situations like that. So how do we reach out to those folks? If you put that layer, that image on top of the demographics of K-12 students in America, the only demographic that is growing at a substantial rate is what we refer to as first-generation students. Those that would be defined as those students where neither parent went to college. That's a cohort of students that we know a lot about. We know they don't come to higher education nearly as often as non-first-gen students. We know that when they come to higher ed, they don't graduate nearly as often. And we know that there's what at least I consider to be a very dangerous narrative taking root within their communities. And that narrative goes something like, college is too expensive, it may not really be worth it, maybe you should just go get a good job and skip borrowing money, taking on this debt for this expensive thing that may not be worth it to you. Let's take a quick time out, step aside from my comments on Spur and say every bit of that narrative is false. It's demonstrably false by things that we used to call facts back when we believed in facts. But that doesn't matter. That narrative gets repeated over and over and over again. And so it tends to become entrenched and it tends to become believed. And surveys that we do with our colleagues at the University of Colorado show that people in Colorado think a college education costs twice what it actually does, and that debt levels are 4 times what they actually are. These are really dangerous narratives, and if we're going to rebut them and make progress as American higher education, we need to make progress within first-generation student communities. So these are typically lower income students and students of color. We haven't served those populations particularly well. And so Spur for us was a big experiment to say, how could we really move the needle over time, it's a long-term experiment, on first-generation students going to college, coming out interested in agriculture writ broad, and becoming a part of that next generation of ag leadership. And for us, that was to create a university, and that happens here, learning, discovery, application, but a mini university that is doing its work on stage, performing for a K-12 audience. So that a first-generation kid whose parents haven't been to college, for whom college is a very foreign concept, can come into a place like this, see age-appropriate exhibits that are based on 3 of the great global challenges. How do we feed the world? How do we make sure there's enough water for the world? How do we deal with health issues that affect our human and animal populations and the overlap of all of those? How do we use those great global challenges to motivate those students? At the same time, we're allowing them to see role models. Scientists like themselves working in careers they didn't know existed, helping to dispel the idea that agriculture is the agriculture that I grew up in. It's not my dad sitting on a tractor or trying to repair a broken down hay bale. Agriculture is so much more than that. If you're into artificial intelligence or drones or technology, molecular genetics, any of these things, as you all know, you can find a great career in agriculture. So we can use these role models and these motivational experiences and present that to these students. And at the same time, we can relentlessly, over and over, every year they're through this facility, pound home the message that that narrative you're hearing about higher education is not true. That there's an affordable pathway to a college degree for everyone in America if you have the talent and the motivation to earn that degree. Most major universities, land grants and the like in this country have something similar to our program, where if you're a Pell eligible student, that's a grant our federal government gives out to low income students, we package the rest of your financial aid together so that your tuition and fees at the university are free. Our polling shows that virtually nobody knows that, and we've been doing it for about 15 years. We have failed, as nearly as I can tell, almost completely to get that message out. And that tells us that the people we need to get that message to, parents in first generation communities, students, first generation students while they're in junior high and in high school, are not receiving that message. How do we get it to their high school teachers? How do we get it to their counselors? We bring all of those groups through Spur. We inundate them with that message on a repeated basis. And we hopefully flip that conversation at a dinner table from, boy, college is expensive, I'm not sure that's the right path, to, I don't know how this stuff necessarily works, but I know I want to do that. I went to a summer program on a college campus that was linked to that trip we took to Spur. I've been on a college campus, I've seen it, it doesn't seem like a foreign thing to me, and I know there's an affordable pathway there. If we can make that difference, if we can change that narrative, at the same time we're motivating and presenting role models, I think we can make a huge difference in reaching first generation students, and in doing that, help develop that next generation of ag leadership. So yes, there's learning here, there's discovery, there's application, but there's also motivation, inspiration, and hope. And that's how I would tell the story of Spur. Now, in between the basic idea and, okay, we've got all the pieces now, we can make Spur work, and what Spur is today, is in between those 2 points is all the hard work, right? Taking a concept, a blank page of paper, and turning it into the things you're seeing, the exhibits, the specific programs, all of those pieces. I was lucky enough when I was in this role to have, as my executive vice chancellor, Amy Parsons, who's now the 16th president of Colorado State University on our Fort Collins campus. And in that role at that time, Amy was the person that I turned to after I would give one of these speeches and say, that thing I just said sounded really good, but I have no idea what it actually is. Could you take a little bit of time and make that real? And figure out what this thing actually looks like. And Amy led all of those efforts, led the design of these buildings along with her number 2, Jocelyn Hiddle, who runs these facilities now. And you're going to get the chance next to hear from the 16th president of Colorado State University, who is foundational in this facility you see here today, Amy Parsons.
I'm not sure I know how to do it. Huh. You don't know how to advance slides. Team. Well, let's go ahead and. So it's doing something, sorry. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. This is why we have a great team. We didn't do the clicker. I was advancing it this way before it was. All right.
I don't need a giant slide in my face, so whatever it is. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Colorado State University Spur. We're so glad that you could spend some time with us here. We've really been looking forward to this visit and having you all here at CSU Spur. So thanks for taking some time out of your very busy agenda to spend with us. Thanks to Kerri, who's been working on organizing this for so long to make sure that all of you can spend a little bit of time with us at CSU Spur. I know you have a really interesting agenda over the last few days, and you'll be going around taking, I think, a self-guided tour after this. So I get the privilege of talking to you a little bit about the art and architecture of this space, and you can keep that in mind as you walk around the campus, okay? So this is gonna be a little bit interactive. I'm gonna ask you the question now so you can be thinking about it, then I'll talk a little bit, then I'll come back to you. But the question really is, what do you all think should be the role of art and architecture in a campus like this, in this campus specifically, and what we're trying to achieve, and what you think should be the role of art and architecture as we look forward to your work in developing the next generation of agricultural leaders. Okay, so everybody's got the question in your mind? So I'll give you a few minutes. I'll talk a little bit and then we'll come back and I'll call on you who want to have a little conversation about this. So I think that it really is particularly fitting that you all are spending a little bit of time here at CSU Spur for all the reasons that Chancellor Frank said. We, CSU, I'm the president of CSU in Fort Collins, so we're the flagship university about an hour north of here. Hopefully you've heard of us. We're the CSU Rams. Would love to host you up there. We're a Research One university in Fort Collins, about 35,000 students. And so this Spur campus represents an important outpost for us in our land grant mission. Right? So as the land-grant university, we have the privilege of having a presence everywhere in Colorado, in every county in the state of Colorado. And this one represents a major step forward in that land-grant mission. So when you think about what we do at CSU, if you're not familiar with the land-grant mission, you know, it's really a special type of university across the US that's about 150 years old, that has the mission of access to education, right? The two sides of the spear, if you will, of access to an excellent education and to a research education. And everything that we do, we look at it through those two lenses. So when I think about access, it's both access into the university, like what Chancellor Frank was talking about, of inspiring kids at a young age. Access starts young, right? To thinking about what they want to be when they grow up, to knowing that they can afford it, that we will support them, that they can be successful here. They arrive at CSU, we have the financial aid, all of that hard work and labor, getting them all the way through to graduation. That's access. But at a land-grant institution, access works in reverse as well. It's us bringing our research and our world-class faculty and all of our knowledge out into the communities where they can really benefit, right? That's why we're out there in so many different communities, and that's why we're here at Spur. So that's one side of it. And Spur is a really interesting experiment on this, right? Of bringing in kids here in new and interesting ways and holding onto them all the way through. But it's not just K-12. We do a lot of work here with lifelong learners, with adult learners, with graduate students, with our own students, right? That sort of laboratory of research and education that's going to happen here. So I think we've got the access mission here. On the excellence mission, you will see when you get a chance to walk around, we have amazing laboratory space here. Incredible research is happening here, especially in sustainability, the green roofs. You're going to hear in a minute from Eugene Kelly talking about the research that's happening here in food and agriculture and food sciences and soil sciences and in equine therapy, in water sustainability, and all of these different ways. But it's not just the research and the academics that's happening inside the buildings. These buildings themselves are a laboratory. So just one example of this, when we took over this site, it's a very gritty urban site. There was a lot to deal with on the site in building these buildings. One of the special things about this site was that it had a 10-foot above ground sewer pipe lining this site. Not only was it ugly and giant sewer pipe, it also helpfully blocked access to the river. The Platte River runs right along here, and you couldn't even access it because of the sewer pipe. So smart researchers at CSU figured out a way to take that eyesore and that blockage to the river and actually partially bury it and capture the heat off of the sewer pipe, creating what is now North America's largest sewer heat recovery system that powers 90% of the energy for this campus. So it's a new model of what's happening inside the buildings, but the buildings themselves and the site as a demonstration project. So I think so far, we just opened this year, so this is all very new, right? But I think so far we're hitting those metrics of access in, access out, and excellence in research in our programs on the other side. But one of the unifying factors in everything that we're doing here at Spur, number 2 is art, which we're about to get to. But number 1 really is the sense of place that I don't think you can replicate. You can't replicate this really anywhere else, I think, in the country or in the world because of the uniqueness of the location. As Chancellor Frank said, this is the historic home of the National Western Stock Show. For 107 years, the largest stock show and rodeo in the country has been held on this site. So in a lot of cities, the stock shows and rodeos are moved out of the urban centers, and they happen in more rural areas. Denver has held on to it as part of the fabric, part of the culture, and the tradition of the site. So this is the historic home of a stock show and a rodeo that dates back as long as anybody can remember. So we are here to capture those audiences and those people who come in by the tens of thousands every year from all rural parts of Colorado and around the country for the stock show. So we have access to that here in what we're doing, right? But the location is also embedded in the most urban center of a growing metropolitan area of Denver, Colorado, which has grown up around it, right? So now we have access to these urban audiences who we're very close to, who can come in by the school bus. Families can come in on the weekends. Surrounding communities can get discounted veterinary care at the vet clinic. We have scholarships for the local high schools right around this site so that those students know that they can come to Colorado State University. So we're being as good a neighbors as we can to the surrounding communities, which are urban communities, while at the same time capturing those rural communities that come in for the stock show. So this is very literally a bridge between urban and rural, right here on this site, right? It's a physical bridge between urban communities and rural communities. You can't really replicate that. That's history, that's location. You can't really create that anywhere else. So we're very fortunate to have this space, right? So aside from that history and that location that makes it so unique for us to be able to carry out our mission, the other thing that we're really trying to do here is to unify a lot of these concepts through art and architecture, and you'll see that as you go through. So we have 3 big new beautiful buildings here, right? We're in the Hydro building, that's the water building. We've got the Terra building across the street, and that's our food and agriculture building that you'll see later. And the other building is called the Vita building, which is focused on animal health and human health. That's where we have our vet clinic, that's where we have our equine therapy program over there. So you can see it even just how we've named these 3 buildings, right? Vita, Terra, and Hydro. So people get a sense for what's happening inside of these buildings. They each have their own logos. And we purposefully, when we built these buildings, we did not hire one architect, which we could have done, right? We debated this in the room. Should we hire one architect so we've got some consistency of look and feel and design, interior and exterior of these buildings? But we didn't. We hired 3 very different architectural firms, gave them 3 different charges for 3 different types of buildings, and you'll see that they look very different. We did that on purpose, right? To get a sense before you walk into the building about what we're trying to say is happening inside these buildings and what our values are in those buildings. And then we did 8 very large art installations, and I hope you get to see all of them here. When we went out to decide what art we were going to put in these buildings, we cast a wide net, right? We were looking for international artists, we were looking for local artists, we were looking for just the most diverse set of art installations that we could find. And I'm just going to showcase 3 of them here, and then we're going to get to the question of why. Why do we put so much emphasis on art and architecture and what it means to a program like this? And this is where I want to hear your thoughts. This is one of the art installations called the Rotation Index. This one is on the bridge between the Hydro building where we are. If you go upstairs, you walk across the bridge to the Terra building, you see Rotation. Now, this is done by a London artist named Jason Burgess. He's a famous international artist who does installations that change and morph based on data going into it. So we've got data sites on our rooftops that actually send information to Rotation about water, about light, about time of day, and all of that data creates changes in the installation all the time. So whether it's full, whether it's half, the colors that are going in is all tied to the data that's going into it. So it's never the same, it's changing all the time, and it just looks super cool at night on the bridge. When it's dark, it's all lit up. The next one that I'll mention here is tomorrow's food. So tomorrow's food is hanging in the Terra building across the street. You can see this large vertical installation that is stalks of wheat. And this is done by a Colorado artist, a female artist. And this looks amazing at night and is a constant reminder to people about where your food comes from. And it's just absolutely beautiful and inspiring work of art, daytime or nighttime, but you can see at night, it looks really amazing. One other one that I don't have a picture of that hopefully you'll see is we have a giant mural on the side of this building, between this building and the next one. It's called Whirlpool. And it's all different shades of blue. And that was done by a local artist, local meaning in the neighborhood adjacent to us, Anthony Garcia. And he brought in all kinds of people from the neighborhoods, kids and older folks and everybody with buckets of paint to create this. So that was a neighborhood project, right? From the neighborhood right next to it. And it is huge and unbelievable. And it's right next to the water building. So we've got several other art installations like this, large installations around campus, and so people can just go on art tours when they're here. So back to my question, why do you think we spent so much time on this? On really deliberately thinking about the architecture of these buildings and about the art that goes into it and the diversity of art that we chose here. What does it mean? The presentation? Representation, absolutely. Representation of different perspectives, of different types of people, of different art. Yep. What else?
Creativity.
Yeah. Creativity. Yeah. I mean, creativity in that we're trying to spark young minds. We're trying to spark all minds here, right? So when you see something that's really different and unique that you've never seen before, opens your mind to creative ideas. And that's what we're trying to do here, creative solutions to thorny problems, right? You're not going to come up with creative ideas or solutions in research unless your mind is open, and hopefully that's what this does, right? Sparks that creativity. Sorry? Appropriation, yeah. So it's a sense of place, right? People own it, especially when you have a big installation like the mural. People own it. It's a sense of pride, right? A sense of community. Like, I helped with that. I helped with that installation, right? I own a piece of that. Yeah, which is important as we're trying to create the next generation of leaders to have that investment in place, right? Yeah. Yes, sir.
I think it shows the commitment to the community, that we're committed to you. We didn't just want to come in here and do something, we wanted to come in here and do something else.
Yeah, that's right. Commitment to community. And not just, local community, Colorado community, global community, right? Yep, absolutely.
Immersion.
Sorry?
Immersion.
Immersion? Who said that? Raise your hand. Immersion? What do you mean by that?
That the whole building is a living system of what they're learning.
Yes, absolutely. So immersion in that the whole building immerses you in what you're learning. Hopefully you can feel that here in the hydro building especially. If you look on the outside of this building, did you notice how it swirls around, right? And you walk through and you see fish, you see water, you see people doing the research, you see in the name and in the logo, and we're immersing you in the idea of water. We try to do that in the other buildings as well. Yes, sir.
Yeah, given the story that you just told us about how this place came to be, I feel like it can inspire a sense of, a lens of hope in the minds of young people to create solutions to problems.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And, the story of how the place came to be, some of our art depicts horses and depicts the West and some of the elements of what's been happening on this site for the last 100 years. And some of it is super ultra modern, right? To inspire different thinking about what we're doing in here. So it plays on both sides, right? That history and that future on the same site. Anything else we're missing?
Collaboration.
Collaboration?
Coordination, because when you think in terms of what agriculture does for its programming decision, you think about the collaboration that it brings together, the cooperation that it brings together.
I love that collaboration that it brings together. I think, even in this sense, what you're saying of, if you and I are standing there together, that's a shared experience, right? And it's opening up a dialogue between us of, what do you think about that? Hearing different perspectives, it's an entree into collaborating by just being a conversation point, right? Being that dialogue between us of how we're seeing it. That's where collaboration starts, right? That's a spark of it. Okay, one or two more? Emotion.
To tackle the global challenges, we need emotion, not only thinking, we need to care. And we need to share, like, in a very private level, that feeling, well, actually, an array of feelings that you have to feel
I love that. Feeling and emotion that you have to feel. I mean, how can you not feel something when you see this lit up at night? You see the stalks of wheat and it inspires you and gives you that sense of emotion that not a lot of things can. I should say too that as we have these 8 large art installations on campus that are very inspiring, we're also committing to bringing in temporary exhibits. So there's exhibits that will be rotating through all of the time. So it's always changing and always different. When you walk the hallways, we want to spark that emotion in a new way, right? To see something new. Who made that, right? And to spark that collaboration and that dialogue. Okay, one more, yes.
It's welcoming. They put all these things here because they want me here. And they want me to look at it.
We do want you here. You're absolutely right. You just nailed it. That's right. And I think for the kids too, it is a sense of fun. We have an installation outside that's a hay bale, and it's this big metal hay bale. And you see kids hanging on it and climbing on it and walking through it and taking pictures on it. So that is a sense. We want you here spending time being creative, being thoughtful, collaborating, having fun, enjoying yourself, and opening your mind and having those feelings. So thanks for engaging in that dialogue. I hope you all get a chance to see the art and appreciate the architecture, what we're trying to do here on a creative level, and really how that interplays with your work of creating the next generation of ag leaders. So with that, I'll stop. I'll turn it back over, and I'll turn it back over to Eugene Kelly. Now, Gene, I don't have like an introduction for Gene. Gene can introduce himself, but he's one of our star professors in soil sciences who's on the excellent side of that spectrum. When we talk about access to excellence, this is the excellence coming up. This is a faculty member right here, Eugene. Thank you.
I wish I could do a different talk right now. Anyway, following Chancellor Frank and President Parsons is not the best setup. But I'm honored to be here, and thank you for having me. It was great being involved the last couple of days in the conversations that we've had regarding the work, the important work you're all doing. And so I thought I would provide a bit of context in terms of, Chancellor Frank talked quite about the land grant mission, and we talked a little bit about some of the program, but I wanted to sort of put in context where CSU is in terms of the national picture and the types of things that we do on a very broad scale, so not only local, but regional and national, and then bring it down to the local level and talk a lot about the exciting things that we're doing at the Spur campus. So the map that I have up there is a map actually produced by CSU scientists, and it has every research center in the country on the map. It includes the continental United States, Alaska, Hawaii, Virgin Islands, Dominica, Puerto Rico, and you can see there are lots of dots out there. And those are supported by money from the federal government. And during the Hatch Act, the federal government provides resources to the land-grant universities to do agricultural research across the entire nation. The states match those to a certain degree, so there are money and resources to develop agricultural programs. And what you'll notice is that these dots, again, are at specific locations in different states. And you can notice that there are more dots in the Northeast and there are less dots. I think Alaska has 2 dots, right? And so those are just actually research centers, physical facilities where we support research scientists. And so there are research scientists working out in these areas, and they do really important work with regard to agriculture. And I think when you start thinking about what we do on a daily basis, a lot of the work we do is, I'll talk about locally derived, but we play an important role nationally. And that we're all interested in the very same things at all the land-grant universities, and that's developing systems that are resilient to climate change, and looking for different ways to evaluate the impacts of our activities on rural communities and urban communities. And one of the things that I've learned in this job, I've been doing it for 6 years already, is that the importance of what we can do in rural communities, and that these facilities provide us with an enormous opportunity to sort of engage rural communities in a very real way and have conversations about the types of things scientifically that our stakeholders in our communities are desiring. So if we move from this continental scale to this national level, right, which is this sort of broad network of sites, I'm going to zero in on Colorado. I have to apologize. On this map, if you're looking closer, you will not see Spur on there because this map was made 2 years ago. But on this map, we have Spur, right? This is our newest research center, and I'll talk a little bit about our agricultural activities there. But this is our statewide research center system that we support in Colorado, and we have 10 sites that span from the northeastern part of the state, where it says Eastern Colorado Research Center. Each of these centers has a very specific role in supporting local stakeholder needs. So, for example, we have a lot of activity in Northeast Colorado that deals with livestock production. On the eastern plains, we have things that deal with dry land agriculture. On the western slope, you can see Grand Valley, Orchard Mesa. Those all deal with pomology, all the great peaches we produce, the fruit trees, and the way we manage water. And each of these research centers, again, supports local needs, right? That's the key thing, that we're actually engaging stakeholders, utilizing science-based information to help solve some real-world problems. The other opportunity that we get, that we don't necessarily get in Fort Collins on our campus, is that we get to participatory research. We actually get to work with farmers and growers in these communities. So we do research activities at our research centers, but we're also out on people's property, where we're working closely with stakeholders on different aspects of the things that they would like to see. The other things we support at a very broad level are community food programs in rural and urban communities. Those are both on the western slope and on the Front Range. And the word, I use climate smart, and I know if you're working in international work, we do climate smart everything now. That's right, climate smart ag, climate smart water, climate smart energy, climate smart forestry. We know that's our big challenge for this generation, and it's something we take seriously here at CSU. And I think a campus like Spur provides us with an opportunity to not only address these at the state level, but at the regional level, national, and of course, global level. And then finally, this idea of supporting rural communities. These facilities allow us to engage rural communities. They become hubs for community meetings. People come in, use the internet, they come in to have events at those research centers. So we've actually transformed the way we're doing business with our rural communities, benefiting from the investment from the federal government, our state legislatures, and our research centers. So I'm going to show this. This is the one slide that got buried before, but this is where we are. And so I'm setting the table for your tour this afternoon. So those are the 3 buildings, and they look very much like that if you walk outside the building. So you're in the hydro building. That's the first one. And that's all about water, and President Parsons and Chancellor Frank talked a bit about that. Great place to visit. There's an enormous amount of science going on here in terms of water quality, managing water, urban water, everything you can imagine with water is done here in terms of research and outreach and engagement. The middle is the Spur Terra building. That's right across the street. You'll see a lot of the activities there deal with things that President Parsons talked about. We have greenhouses on our roofs. We have green roofs. We have the largest green roof in North America here between the hydro building and the Terra building. We have agrivoltaics. We have solar panels above many of those installations. We have growth chambers, we have greenhouses, we have community kitchens, we have all sorts of things going on, and I'll go into a bit more detail on those. And then as President Parsons and Chancellor Frank talked about the Vita building, which is the Life building, which is really a trip if you want to go in there. It's a great place to walk around with your family, but they have veterinary activities that you can actually watch the surgery. You can actually sit there and watch a veterinarian working on an animal, which is an incredible experience. And I spend a lot of time here now, which I don't mind, actually. Good coffee down here and everything. But it's an amazing place, and there are just students walking every day. There are hundreds of students, young people walking through this building, staring through those windows. And I think the thing that strikes me, this is a little bit off my record, but the thing that strikes me about this campus is the openness and transparency. You can walk through the hallways and look into laboratories, see people wearing lab coats, see them talking to each other. We can watch what they're doing on televisions, but it really is a place that's very open to the public, and you'll see that when you're walking through. There are no walls. just vision, glass. You can see everything, right? So it's really a remarkable place, and I encourage you on your tour this afternoon to try to get to all 3 buildings. We have people stationed outside, so they'll hopefully guide you in some of the things, and feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions about specific programs. So this idea now that we have this center, these centers that we have around the state. We have this opportunity now at Spur campus. We have a really, really unique opportunity. I study research centers all over the world, and this is the most unique. There's nothing like this on the planet. I'm proud to be a faculty member here, but this is an enormous opportunity. But I think that the important part of it is that when you see what we're doing on a national level in terms of agriculture, what I see going on, and I've been at this a long time, longer than Tony actually, and I have the gray hair to show it, is that what we're doing now is there's a real convergence on the science that we're doing in North America in agriculture with what's going on with our neighbors in Canada and in Mexico, but also globally. And we're centering ourselves on the strategic development goals. We're all focusing on those. We're, in one way or another, we're all coming back to those goals that were set out before. And if you look at these initiatives that we have here in terms of sustainable development, regenerative agriculture, managing water, managing social justice, all of those things are now something that we're all working on globally. So we all have the same challenges, right? We all have different opportunities and resources. But I wanted to say that the work we're doing here at Spur does have global significance, right? The conferences that we hold here, the important scientific meetings, the developments that we have in our laboratories in terms of our work in microbiome, our work in soil science, our work in water quality, plant genetics, plant diagnostic, all of those areas are really relevant to what's going on globally. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift just to our research program in terms of the Ag Experiment Station, talk about some of the challenges we have, and what you're hearing more and more in terms of agriculture is innovation, right? So we start talking more about innovation, and innovation means a lot. It's not just taking your iPhone out and having an app to turn on your sprinklers and turn off your sprinklers. Innovation is about getting people together and coming up with new approaches and new ideas. It's not necessarily something you're carrying around in your pocket. It's something you carry around your soul. Right? So that's the idea, is to sort of look at really, really innovative ways of looking at things. And I think what's happening now is agriculture's challenged with transforming our food production systems. And we need to transform them to be more regenerative and more sustainable and more equitable and more just. And I think that's been one of our major opportunities. A campus like Spur provides us with an enormous opportunity to take the scholarship that we have up in Fort Collins in here and get it out to our rural communities and work really closely with our stakeholders in looking at the new discoveries. And this is everything from non-governmental organizations to private entities to local governments and our citizens. One of the really big opportunities I see with the Spur campus and the work we're doing statewide is the educational opportunities. I mean, we've had, like I said before, an enormous amount of students, and Kelly's going to talk quite a bit about the educational programs. But when I'm out in the field at these different centers around the state, those individuals walk into the CSU campus. So we treat those resource centers as portals. And so our rural communities can step right onto a campus when they walk into our institutions. They can get an answer from that place, or they can get an answer from Central Campus. Or if they need an answer from something that has to do with livestock, I can call the veterinary hospital and get them an answer right away. So we've developed a network of sites in the state that are very open and transparent and provide opportunities to expand and innovate in agriculture. Okay, so now the exciting stuff. The programs we have that you're going to see this afternoon, I just want to highlight a few of those. We really are about enhancing visibility of agriculture. And one of the major things that we've struggled with is, the idea of this chasm between rural and urban and what people don't know about agriculture. And we really have an opportunity now to show people, it's an old adage, of where their food comes from. And I can tell you that the exhibits we have out here and the people that we have manning these exhibits, I'm amazed at the number of people that walk out of here and say, I never knew that we grew peaches in Colorado, or I never knew that, we had the best potatoes in the world for Jim Erlinger. He told me to say that. And those sorts of things. So it really is an opportunity to educate our public. It's a real big platform for recruiting students, right? And getting students to look at, and I agree with Chancellor Frank, I don't think it's necessarily about CSU, although we are Colorado's #1 choice. It is an opportunity for people to pursue higher education, whatever that looks like, a 2-year college or a 4-year degree. I think this is the opportunity, and we know that food and agriculture is humanity's largest industry. And I tell this to students all the time. There are so many opportunities in agriculture, right? There's so many, right? There's just, it's endless, right? The jobs that students will take aren't even created yet. I mean, that's one of the things that we consider. In the Metro Ag area, we also get to look at different types of technology. So we support food production systems and local economies. And the idea of really fostering innovation, and we have a picture of a solar panel up here. This is a photovoltaics. And so we put these solar panels over agricultural fields. We have them over our cherry trees, or we will have them hopefully over in the Orchard Mesa area. We have them over our grasslands in eastern Colorado. And there are these myths that farmers have about, well, we're losing production, and we're not. We've done the research. The research says, no, you're not losing production. You're actually doubling down on production. You're getting energy, and you're fixing carbon for food and all of those things. So the research really supports that, and that's really what my job is, to make sure that we're providing the necessary research. In terms of the agricultural research work we have down here with the experiment station, we have the Metropolitan Ag Research Center, and that's the one you'll get to see that this afternoon. We have lots of programming in agricultural education and outreach, and Kelly will talk about some of that. And then the other aspect of this that always makes me a little bit uncomfortable is the agribusiness part of it. I was like, what? Right? Well, the opportunity for agribusiness is enormous, particularly in Denver. Lots of innovation, people interested in every aspect of food, not only from the production aspect, the processing, the cooking, the marketing, and we have educational programs that support all of these activities statewide. The Metro Ag Research Center is in my wheelhouse. This is the thing that I guide the work on that. So I told you before, we have green rooms. We have one on Terra that you'll be able to see, and there's one on hydro. We have photovoltaics on the hydro building. You'll see that we have an enormous greenhouse that we're renovating. It's a research grade greenhouse. Hydroponic, organic hydroponics and aquaculture are going to be demonstrated there. Growth chamber facilities, state-of-the-art laboratories, and we're providing cutting-edge technology and hands-on opportunities to produce food in urban centers and the opportunity to increase that. We have a community food system program that works on the equity and justice and distribution of foods. There are lots of areas ripe for research in this thing. We've invested heavily in terms of the agricultural experiment station, both on the western slope and on the front range here. Again, providing equitable access to food, and nobody should go to bed hungry. And then one of my favorite spots of the campus is the saltwater testing laboratory. So we had a state-funded laboratory that was up in Fort Collins. We had the opportunity to move it to Denver. And the really good thing was we were able to upgrade all the facilities. So we have state-of-the-art equipment. We'll be the vanguard program for doing things in soil health, disease, microbiome, water analysis. It's an enormous opportunity. When you're up on that third floor and you're walking through, there's all this glass there, and you'll see those laboratories, and the students just walk right up to the glass. And they can see people and they're working, and that lab is twice the size it was up in Fort Collins. We have summer internship programs, high school students, right, college students working in our laboratories, working side by side with scientists on things like microbiome. I mean, what is that, right? Microbiome. Anybody know what microbiome is? What is microbiome? Yeah. Well, you raised your hand, so yeah, okay. I thought Tony was going to raise his hand, but anyway, you can go. Yeah, that's exactly. And it's really the Pandora's box, right, of environmental science. It's like we open it up and it's like, whoa, right? We don't know what's there, but we have amazing scientists at CSU that work in microbiome and in developing techniques here that'll be used in systems around the world to identify things like soil health and the key aspects of soil health. We work on plastics, another plastic problem. We have a state-of-the-art laboratory up here. We're working on plastics, right? And so that's another big thing. But this is a really great facility. It allows us to increase our capabilities to help our stakeholders locally, regionally, and globally, and also the idea of security and biosecurity. So we have biosecurity clearances here as well. And then finally, I'll wrap things up. One of the fun things that you'll see here is the Global Food Innovation Center. And I can't give it enough recognition. It's really a remarkable place. We have some of the best scientists leading that program. And so I took some snapshots. I tapped trying to make it artsy. I'm not a really good artist with twisting the photos, but anyway. These are three different entities here. We have the dairy, we have dairy safety, meat safety, and produce safety, right? And that's on the east side of that building. And then right across the hall is where you cook it. So it's about processing food and preparing food. So you'll see that in the building across the hall. And it's remarkable. We have the very best people. We have industry partnerships that's supporting us, JBS, and we have the Leprino cheese. We have the vegetable producers of Colorado are helping us as well. So it's really a remarkable place and lots of innovation going on there. And again, for people that are in urban systems, this idea of safe food is they take it for granted. They didn't know. When I told them about one of the people, I was out in the hallway and they said, well, you know, what do you do there? I said, someone tell you something, you go and wash your vegetables. That's whatever it is, just wash them, right? And that's a really good message, wash your vegetables. And then finally, one of the bigger sort of parts of that, and actually a really place where I think we get engagement and we collect as a community to talk about things, is really around food. I mean, all the conversations we had here over the last couple of days was always around meals and sharing thoughts and experiences. Well, we have a culinary kitchen over there. That's an industrial size. We just had a big event over the weekend where we brought chefs in from around the state of Colorado. And we have a sensory laboratory. So different industry partners can get samples taken and tested. And we can bring in community members from really diverse backgrounds that they've never ever been able to sample before. So that's one of the other things. And then finally, wrapping it up with the ag business and innovation, we have programs here to develop new entrepreneurship. The universities, as you know, around the world, you know, we're in a position where scientists are now sort of not being forced, but being asked to take things that they're working on, commercializing. And let's get these out. And I agree with that completely. Science needs to support it, but the idea of taking things out and getting them out to the public a lot quicker is really one of the things we can do here. We have innovators who can take ideas and get them out to market pretty quickly. And we can jump through all the loopholes in terms of intellectual property and rights, and of course the protection of the intellectual rights of our scientists. And then the idea of training. We have a master's program in training new agribusiness people in ag innovation. This is a partnership that we have with some of our faculty, Greg, the two Gregs, we call them. I can't remember the name, Greg Perry, right? And Greg Graff, that's it. And they have industry partners, and those people come in and they pay for graduate students to work on specific projects. It's an adult sort of education program. They come in at night and take their classes in the evening. They all work during the day, but they'll be getting master's degrees in ag business and innovation. And then finally, what I would consider the Vanguard program, one of the Vanguard programs we have down here is the Temple Grandin Equine Assisted Therapy Center. You have to go over and look at that. I'd say go first over there when you get out this building. It's a remarkable facility where we're training the next generation of therapists. And the other thing we're doing is we're providing important research to the medical community about this being a useful way to treat people that have, you know, challenges. And there isn't research on that, but we're doing it here. So it's really pretty incredible. So I'm really proud to be involved. Anyway, do I turn it over, Kerri? Yeah, Kelly. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kellie Enns from the same college. And Kelly's going to talk about education, right?
Well, thank you. I'm very humbled to be part of this panel and part of this group of speakers. And I think my job here today is just to talk a little bit about how a faculty member has taken the inspiration that you've heard here today and tried to implement that in a programmatic sense here at Spur. And how this idea of a Spur campus has really broadened our view of agricultural education in Colorado. So I'm an associate professor. I work at the CSU Fort Collins campus, but we actually have a laboratory, a learning laboratory in the Terra building. It's on the third floor in the back corner, so I hope in your tour you might make your way over there to see a little bit about the work that we're trying to do here. Let me tell you a little bit about agricultural education in Colorado and our goal to make agricultural education a little more accessible. We came up with this grand idea to have a learning laboratory at CSU Spur and to find a way to bridge urban and rural agricultural education, honestly, a really long time ago. In 2015, Dr. Temple Grandin, who was one of our renowned animal scientists from our CSU Fort Collins campus, was inducted into the Colorado Agricultural Hall of Fame. And when she gave her acceptance speech and talked about her horse riding lessons being a gateway into animal science. And it was so profound to me. She said, people can't choose what they don't know. And to me, I thought, well, how do we get them to choose agriculture? Like, if they don't have access to it, how do we get them to choose that? And that's where CAM's Agriculture Academy was born. So this is CAM. And for those of you that don't know, this is our mascot at our CSU Fort Collins campus. And CAM stands for Colorado Agriculture and Mechanics, which was the previous name of our institution. So that's his name is Cam, and that's why Cam's Ag Academy was born. In Colorado, when we talk about agricultural education, we're often talking about this formalized, systematic program of agricultural education that's delivered through our secondary programs. In Colorado, we have 135 agricultural education programs, about 160 teachers, and about 9,000 students in Colorado that are enrolled in secondary programs of agricultural education. My role has traditionally, and always will be, about training teachers for those programs. How do we get the next generation of teachers to inspire the next generation of leaders? It's delivered in a 3-part model, and that's probably familiar to most of you: the FFA, work-based learning, and this classroom component. But let me say this one more time. There's 9,000 students in Colorado. There's almost 900,000 students in our public secondary programs. 1% are enrolled in school-based ag education. So we thought, we gotta do something different. That's an important program. We should boost those up. We should staff those programs. We should encourage those, but we should also think about how do we get the next generation involved. Our response was agricultural literacy, which really is broadening this view of agricultural education. How do we get people to understand, to analyze, to communicate priorities around agriculture, regardless of background, regardless of experiences, regardless of their value systems or ideologies around agriculture? How do we get them to communicate about agriculture in meaningful ways? So let me tell you a little bit about CAMS and how we might be trying to work in this space a little bit. CAMS Ag Academy has an aspirational statement that every school-age student in Colorado has a significant agricultural experience. And we think that's important. It's that access point, right? So we don't know what significant ag experience is necessarily, but we do think that having a significant engagement activity with somebody who's passionate about agriculture and wants to teach the next generation, there might be a little magic that can happen there. So we designed this in kind of a 3-step pathway process of badging, bridging, and building. Understanding that this is all based on a career pathway for Colorado agriculture. I'll come back to that. Let me tell you a little bit about badging. I'm wearing my badge. I have badges here for you too, if you want to see your badge. The badging engagements are simply where we take our CAMS Agricultural Academy on the road. We take it out to fairs, to festivals, to community-based agricultural spaces. And we do this because it is that idea of taking Spur out. Okay, so we deliver education here at Spur, but we also want to take Spur out to the masses. And that's through our CAMS on the road activities. In 23, we had almost 35,000 engagements with students. Potentially 35,000 students that didn't think about Colorado agriculture before. And we think, oh, there might be something there, right? Can we get them to start thinking about this career pathway in agriculture? By the way, the badge came about for those of you that have ever gone to a national park in the United States. This is how this came to be. We were actually at a research conference, and I have some colleagues in the room, so they'll understand this, at our Western Research Conference in Alaska. And before the conference started, my teaching partner Nathan Clark and I, we brought our families with us, and we were at a national park, and my kids were doing the Junior Ranger program. And I looked at Nathan, and he looked at me, and I was like, why are we not doing this in agriculture? And that's exactly where the badging, that whole idea of let's engage students, let's have them do a cool activity, and then badge them. We make them do the sign of the ram and pledge to teach others about agriculture. It's awesome. Okay. Yeah. And then there's bridging. And this is our newest one. We launched it last spring, and we have it initiated this fall as well. And this is where students explore critical problem-based learning on research that's happening at our research stations and at our Fort Collins campus. And that's here up in Terra in our third floor laboratory. And then we build these 8 intensive curriculum units and we send it statewide and invite them to come here and experience this. To help frame this for you, this is the question that we're exploring this semester. We are experiencing unprecedented challenges in food and agronomic crops, including lodging, plant pests, and changes in the growing season. How can plant or crop diversity, selection and breeding help solve these challenges? This is based upon research that's been done by Dr. Pat Byrne on our main campus and Kat Chen, who's part of our National Seed Storage Program. And they helped us write this curriculum. We have 36 schools, and you can see in Colorado where we're engaging those programs, and 700 students involved in that problem-based learning, trying to deepen that understanding of agriculture. Badging, bridging. Finally, the last place, and I don't do, are any of our state officers? Oh, hi, will you two stand up for me? This is Maggie and Cole, and they're 2 of our state FFA officers. Yeah. So this is pretty cool, but when CSU Spur was built, we have these 10 state officers that are elected every June. They take a gap service year to serve the state and young people enrolled in agricultural education. But when CSU Spur was built, some visionaries said they should live here at Spur. So this just blows my mind that they get to do this, but they live on top of Vita. They have an apartment on top of Vita, these 10 students. They live and work at CSU Spur, and then they work with our public, trying to bridge that understanding about agriculture. Now, let me tell you, it was such a privilege to be able to do this, but we realized if we're going to take high school seniors that have just graduated and move them to urban Denver, often from rural areas, we better bolster their education a little. So on Mondays, every single Monday, I'm sure they're super stoked about it, but we do intensive professional development for these students. How do you work with diverse populations? How do you talk to people that don't know agriculture? How do you invest in young people? This is like dedicated professional development so that they can go out and do the work that they're tasked to do. It's pretty great. Thanks for being here too. Areas of expansion. Dr. Erin Baxter's here, and one of the areas that we hope to build is a Grow Institute to really connect other industry leaders here at Spur to come to a conference just like you have here. How lucky would our young people be to do that same thing? And then to really build some educator training resources that are accessible and online for our volunteers and those that work in our spaces. And because we're a land-grant institution, I wanted to just provide a few questions that we're trying to explore. And these are some of the data points that now that we're programmatically developed, how can we then collect the data to see if we're making an impact in these spaces? Can ag literacy efforts improve accessible career choices in agriculture? Can ag literacy improve people's affinity towards being involved in ag careers? And can we better train future teachers through these options? I'd be remiss, good ideas are just good ideas, but I wanted to give a shout out to the Marcus Family Foundation. They actually invested in our spaces, both education, K-12 here at Spur, and also at Kanzak Academy to really launch our work. So I'm really grateful to them. That's all I have, because I know Lauren's next, but I just wanted to say thank you for listening, and thank you to our visionaries, and to hopefully have some more conversations about how we have, as a program, kind of internalized that accessible education space.
Executive Director of Together We Grow. And before I get started and tell you a little bit about Together We Grow, I want to talk about a few keys to the challenge. So Together We Grow is a consortium of some of the world's largest agriculture and food interests. So that's agriculture and food companies, higher education institutions like CSU, national NGOs in the US, as well as the USDA. And what we know, and you all know this as well, Chancellor Frank alluded to it yesterday, we have a great challenge of feeding the world. And whether that number is 10 million or some other number, what we do know is that it's bigger. We have more people to feed, and we not only need to feed them, but we need to do it sustainably, and we need to do it in a way that addresses climate change. So that's no easy task. But we also know that diverse teams, diverse workforce actually achieve greater results, greater profitability, greater performance, better decision making, and more innovation, which we desperately need to meet that challenge. At the same time, we know that student bodies within our current food and agriculture programs are not as diverse as the populations of other typical college-age students. We also know that 40%, almost 40%, of our agriculture and food workforce will come from non-traditional workers. And so these are people who are not pursuing these programs. So as a result, Together We Grow is really focused on building a diverse and capable workforce for the agriculture and food sector, specifically to the US. We do that in a number of ways. Primarily, that's through collaboration with our partners and our members on three really key strategies. The first one being broadening that pipeline of diverse talent into ag and food by engaging people in new and different ways. So that's number one. Number two is connecting organizations and professionals that are in food and agriculture to foster collaboration, but also to build inclusive cultures within our organizations. And then finally, to support the diversification of the workforce through industry-wide benchmarking and assessments, as well as curating best practices for diversity initiatives. So if you step back and look at that, we're really looking at it as an ecosystem. So starting with ensuring students are aware, as Kelly said, that they're aware of something they don't know, which is, I exist in ag and food, I belong in ag and food, that's a place I can go, and it's a place of opportunity that I may not have been aware of otherwise. Then it's ensuring when they step into that organization that they actually find an inclusive culture, an environment that supports them, and that we retain that talent. And then over the long term, that we hold ourselves accountable to progress through data and ensuring that we're actually making progress over time. Now, clearly, we can't do that work without partnership. In fact, Together We Grow from a staff perspective is very small. And so I'll say a couple of thank yous because we have great members, we have a great board of directors, but we work with groups like the NAAAN and Kerri Conway's team to really build intentional partnership about how do we reach that next generation that doesn't even know that ag is a place that they belong and should exist. And then we also want to say a huge thank you to Colorado State University, who's not only a member of Together We Grow, but they are a gracious host of our organization. And as a result, we are headquartered here at Spur in the shop, which is connected to Hydro, and we could not do this work without them. So I think in closing, I said I'd be brief. I task myself in kind of a call to action to all of us. You hear over these few days an amazing amount of work being done to build this next generation for agriculture and food. And I'd say there's so much work being done that we continue to convene, look at opportunities to align, to complement each other and not compete, and then ultimately we create more efficient partnerships to make progress over time. So thank you for these few minutes, and I think at this point we'll call up Kerri.
So much. What a great team, right? How amazing is this, both the visionary opportunities and the way we take this forward. We are really, really blessed and honored. One other additional member of our team who I want to introduce you all to, she's been with us for this meeting. She helped our team develop where we were going to go and the farm visits, and graciously has given up her time. Our interim vice president for extension and engagement is Kathy Reynolds. So here's a few places we want you to go to and take off. We've got coffee and refreshments for you in the lobby. And give you an idea of just a time frame, we're at 3:35, roughly around 4:45, we'll start moving either by buses or walking. Am I right, team? I see. Correct. Thank you. We're heading over to the National Western Events Center, Stockyard Events Center, where the fun begins, as if you have not already been having fun today. So it'll ramp up at 4:45, we'll be heading over. One thing I'd like to do, remember all the people who stood up yesterday at the beginning when I said, who are the leaders of the next generation in all your countries? And half the room stood up, so the 40s and unders. We would like to take a picture of your group and folks outside of the back on Hydro. When you go to get your refreshments and then head outside, we'll get a big picture of all the next generation who came to this conference here at Hydro. So we are honored and privileged to have you with us. So with that, please go out, have fun, mingle, stay with your buddies. So the buddies